Hi, my name is Chris, and I'm the cartoonist behind the Krogan Adventures series. I thought I would start posting some videos with processes, techniques, demos, lectures, and that sort of thing, and I figured that I would start out with something simple, a little watercolor demo. So here we go. Okay, so I'm going to do one of my characters, Peter Krogan. To get started, I'll usually hedge in a geometric shape, whatever one I've settled on for a specific character. For him, it's a vertical rectangle. Usually draw either the nose or the eyes first inside. He's got this sort of hook-like nose, a fighter's nose. And this character has a mustache, and I used to always draw the mustache and just allow that to hint at the mouth, but I'm trying to get it to where my characters have more of an emotional range, and so I'll usually draw in the mouth below a mustache now, and just put the mustache in afterwards. So this character has a hat called a kepi. He's in the French Foreign Legion, so it has a visor, and a real kepi would end right about here. But mine is a little more designy, just trying to push the visual aspect of it. And so mine's almost a mix between a kepi of the period and an Ascari fez, with a little more give to it. And I'll occasionally do these deviations from historical accuracy. I say occasionally, I'll do them all the time. If I think that it better suits the design, or if it keeps it from being confusing, or whatever else it might be. So he's got just a cover, protects the neck from the sun, and I'll draw that blowing in the wind because it will hopefully make the composition a little more dynamic. Now, in order to put down my ink, for pencils, I'll just use a standard number 2 picked up at the grocery store. For inking, I like to use a Faber-Castell Pitt pen when I'm working for color. I use a brush when I'm working for black and white, but for color I find that the closer to deadline I get, the more likely I am to do a drawing that actually allows for me to lay in color fairly easily. I really like these Pitt pens because they have a pretty good variation in line. Although they're ostensibly deadline, you can get a pretty good variety, so fairly thick to pretty thin. That keeps the line a little bit springy, and I like that. It keeps it lively. So I'll go in, almost just repeat what I've done before, in terms of starting with that crook of the nose there. Drawing the eyes. I'll occasionally add details in the ink. A lot of times I'll add details in the ink. My pencils tend to be fairly loose. And throwing his cheekbones there. He's got fairly stark cheekbones. Hint of that hair. A little metal bit right there that holds the visor in place. And sometimes I won't even actually draw the visor, whereas I'll do most of my inking after I erase the pencils in terms of laying in the blacks. I will sometimes hit the bigger areas with a permaopaque marker, just so that I don't have to try and match them with the inks. So just 2 quick little lines for eyebrows. And the permaopaque and the Faber-Castells both are filled with India ink, which is nice because, you know, it's more or less waterproof. It is light fast, which means it's not going to fade with time, at least not for, you know, a few decades. And I used to draw the necks in as little pencil necks, kind of. You can look at any of my old books and see that. But again, from a drawing standpoint, it made it a lot more difficult to allow the character to pose, to show the character from different angles, just because the anatomical basis for how the neck met the skull wasn't really in place. This is probably a little bit thicker than I'd usually have his neck be, but you know, for the sake of this drawing, I don't think it's too much of a problem. There we go. Okay, so that part is done, and now what I'll do is I'll use a Faber-Castell dust-free eraser. I really like these because, as a rule, they make long ropes of erasers instead of little dust particles, which I can't stand. It makes it just easier to sweep off the table, vacuum up, whatever it might be. You have to erase fairly light because it does have a tendency to pull the ink just a little bit, brush ink especially. But as long as you use a light touch, it's usually not that much of a problem. Now, I can see in here that the line that I made under his eye is maybe a little scratchier than I like. I don't like to put much dry brush in there. I want everything to be as crisp as possible. So I'll go in and fix that. I'll also chunk in these black areas here. Both the mustache, a little bit under the neck, the visor here, a little bit of hair. Throw a couple lines in there just to keep the line weight looking, jumpy. A little bit to insinuate that leather there. That should be it for the inks. For colors, I use this little $20, $22 watercolor kit that I picked up at my local art supply store, Binders. And let me just get started. For a Caucasian character, generally speaking, I'm going to mix a little bit of red and a little bit of tan and muddy that up a bit and go in and start dropping in where I think shadows would be. I treat watercolors the way I would treat digital cell shading. I learned to color digitally, and so operating with that mindset helps me to wrap my head around watercolors in a way that otherwise I wouldn't be able to. I think very much in line, and so form has never been one of my strong suits, which means that as a painter I tend to be abysmal. But this I just think of as a colored drawing, which allows me to wrap my head around it a little more comfortably. So I've got a lot of excess color there. I'll swoop that up into the mustache so that it gets lost. Throw that down, put just a bit of it around the chin. I'm going to put some 5 o'clock shadow on that chin in a little bit. And I don't want it to stand out too starkly with it just being white. Now, I've desaturated the color as much as possible just to keep it from being too glaring. That's mixing in just a little bit of green in there just to keep it to where it's not, bright peach. I tend to like a fairly desaturated palette. Okay, so that part is done. Let me have a paper towel. I do. Okay. So now I'm going to use just a little bit of yellow, just a little bit of blue here to mix what's going to be the shade for white. As I said, this guy's in the French Foreign Legion. His uniform is mostly white, so I don't want to put a whole lot in there, but I also want it to not be too stark. So there we go. That works for that. If his skin is dry, which it looks to be, I'll mix in just a little bit of red in here and throw that on his nose, throw it on his cheekbones. Keep it to where I have a little bit of variation on that color. I'll throw in a little bit around the neckline there. Keep them looking as organic as possible. You know, hit those areas where the blood would be flowing pretty freely under the skin. And he's needs to have a little bit of a haunted look. You know, he's occupying a region that doesn't really want to be occupied. A lot of his friends have passed away, so I'm gonna take a little bit of blue, a little bit of brown, mix those up, and I'm gonna hit just under the eyes here. Give them kind of a raccoony quality. And I'm also going to add just a little bit more blue to that and use that same shade to give him his 5 o'clock shadow, his stubble. I'd probably prefer to use a little more blue there, just to gray it up a little bit, but that'll do. I'm going to pull that excess water into that black there. There we go. Most of my characters have, or a lot of my characters have that 5 o'clock shadow. I shaved about 10 minutes ago and I'm already on the verge of having gray face. So my characters are likewise afflicted. Now for a thing like this, let me go ahead and shine it first, since I'm going to be laying in color and trying to avoid that signature. Since this particular book is blue, or the cover is blue, I'm going to mix a little bit of regular blue and a lot of the sort of sky aqua blue here. A little bit more water. And I'm going to use that for the background just to keep it to where it looks like a finished drawing. I like leaving the backgrounds white, but at the same time, I understand the desire to have what looks like an entire finished piece, and this will bring that a little bit closer. So I'll go ahead and lay in chunks of this blue at a time, and then go back in and spread it around, just so that I'm more likely, to be uniform in the color, since it is a mixed color, and since I mix directly in the colors themselves as opposed to on a separate palette. Now this guy's almost done. I forgot one important bit of business. Let me go ahead and blot up some of that blue if it's possible. There we go. And that is the straps there. Gonna again mix a little bit of blue, a little bit of brown. And there we go. Finished little watercolor drawing. Thanks again for watching. Hopefully you found this somewhat entertaining. I found it educational in terms of trying to put the video together. And hopefully I'll do this again real soon.